It was just a game, an innocent dare between friends. Until, in a single moment, between daring glances and my racing heart, I was pushed into a choice that would change everything: accept the challenge and lose my virginity that night. The party was alive with music and laughter, the air thick with the smell of alcohol and cheap cologne. I wasn't even supposed to be there. My best friend Camilla had practically dragged me, promising it would be life-changing. I wasn't convinced, but I went along anyway, and that's when I saw him, Liam Carter, the boy I had been secretly crushing on for months. He was everything: tall, confident, with that lazy smirk that made my stomach flip every time he looked at me. And tonight, for some reason, he was looking at me. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then he moved closer, his green eyes locking onto mine across the room. My heart hammered. When he finally reached me, I felt like I had forgotten how to breathe. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice smooth, teasing. I forced myself to smile. "Yeah, well, first time for everything." He tilted his head as if analyzing me, his gaze dipping briefly to my lips before meeting my eyes again. Maybe tonight should be full of firsts. A shiver ran down my spine. Was he flirting with me? Before I could even process what was happening, someone called out from the center of the living room, "Truth or dare?" A circle had formed. People were already laughing, exchanging glances, waiting for the next victim. "Come on," Liam said, his hand brushing against mine, the contact sending electricity through my skin. "Let's play." I hesitated for only a second. Then, I followed him. And just like that, the game began. I slid into the circle beside Liam, my heartbeat so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. The game had already been going for a while. Some people were tipsy, others flushed from embarrassing dares, and a few couples had already disappeared into the house, following whispered challenges and lingering touches. I wasn't sure why I agreed to play. Maybe it was the way Liam's hand had brushed against mine, or the way his gaze lingered, promising something unspoken. The bottle spun. A girl named Becca picked truth and admitted to hooking up with two guys in the same night. Someone else picked dare and had to strip to their underwear. The group was getting bolder, the atmosphere heavier, charged with something electric. Then, Liam leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "You nervous?" I turned to him, trying to ignore the way my skin tingled from his closeness. "No." He smirked, as if he could see right through me. "Good." The bottle spun again, and then, my name was called. "Truth or dare, sweetheart?" A guy I barely knew grinned at me, clearly enjoying my hesitation. I could feel Liam watching me, waiting. Something inside me, maybe the part that had spent too long being invisible, flared up. "Dare." A few people cheered. Someone whistled. The guy's grin widened. "I dare you to go into one of the bedrooms with Liam for 15 minutes. Laughter erupted. My stomach flipped. Liam didn't hesitate. He stood up, extending his hand to me like this was all some kind of game he had already won. I stared at him, at his confidence, at the way his lips twitched in amusement. I could back out now. I could say no. But something about the way he looked at me, like he had already imagined this moment, made it impossible. I took his hand. Whistles and teasing followed us as Liam led me down the hallway, away from the laughter, the music, the game. When we stepped into the room, he pushed the door until it clicked shut behind us. Silence. I swallowed, suddenly unsure. The air felt warmer in here, heavier. Liam leaned against the door, watching me. "Didn't think you'd actually do it." I crossed my arms. "Why? You don't think I can handle a dare?" His eyes darkened slightly, as if something about my response intrigued him. "Oh, I think you can handle a lot more than this." he murmured. The way he said it sent a slow, unfamiliar heat spreading through me. I didn't know what I had expected. Maybe for him to laugh it off, to tease me. But instead, he stepped closer. I felt it then. The shift. The moment where the game didn't feel like a game anymore. My pulse pounded as he reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. He moved slowly, like he was waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. His hand lingered on my jaw, his thumb skimming my skin. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. I parted my lips, but no words came out. And then, he kissed me. Soft at first, like he was testing, tasting. Then deeper, hungrier, like maybe he had been waiting for this as long as I had. I had imagined kissing Liam 100 times, but nothing compared to the way he actually felt. Warm, consuming, impossible to pull away from. My hands found his shoulders, fingers curling into his shirt as he backed me up against the wall, his body pressing into mine just enough to make my breath hitch. The minutes blurred. His hands explored, careful, coaxing. My own nervousness melted away under his touch, replaced by something new, something I didn't fully understand but didn't want to resist. And in that moment, it didn't feel like a dare at all. It felt real. Liam's hands moved over my waist, his touch deliberate yet slow, as if he was memorizing every inch of me. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out everything but the feeling of his body pressed against mine. The game, the party, the dare, none of it mattered anymore. His lips traced a slow path down my jawline, leaving behind a trail of heat that made my breath hitch. My fingers tangled in his shirt, holding on to him like I was afraid this moment would slip through my fingers if I let go. This wasn't how I thought my first time would start. I had always imagined something different, softer, maybe, with whispered confessions of love, gentle hands, and flickering candlelight. But standing there, against the wall of a stranger's bedroom, Liam looking at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. This felt right. "You sure about this?" His voice was husky, rougher than before, like even asking me that was taking every ounce of his control. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the moment settle between us. A choice. I could stop this now. I could walk away, but I didn't want to. I looked into his eyes, searching for something, anything, that would tell me this wasn't just a game to him. And for a fleeting second, I thought I saw it. Something real. I nodded. "I'm sure." His lips crashed into mine again, and this time there was no hesitation. The world blurred around us as we stumbled toward the bed, my hands threading through his hair, his fingers tracing the curve of my spine. Every touch, every kiss, every whispered breath sent a thrill through me, awakening something I hadn't known existed. He was patient, gentle. And when it finally happened, when I crossed that invisible line between before and after, I felt safe, wanted, his. The minutes stretched into hours, each moment slipping into the next until I could no longer tell where I ended and he began. By the time we lay tangled in the sheets, my heart still racing from everything we had just shared, I couldn't stop the small smile that tugged at my lips. I had given him everything, and maybe, just maybe, he had given me something real too. Liam propped himself up on one elbow, his fingers trailing absent-mindedly along my arm. His usual smirk had softened, his expression unreadable. "What?" I asked, feeling suddenly self-conscious. He shook his head, something flickering behind his gaze before he leaned in, pressing a lingering kiss to my forehead. "Nothing," he murmured, "just, you're amazing." My chest tightened. This was real. It had to be. He wouldn't be looking at me like that if it wasn't. Right? I drifted off in his arms, my body exhausted but my heart full. I had no idea that by morning, that feeling would shatter into 1,000 pieces. The sunlight broke through the blinds, soft and golden, painting the room in a warm, almost peaceful light. I woke slowly, the remnants of sleep still clinging to my thoughts as I turned to face Liam. He was still asleep, his chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of his breath. For a moment, I just watched him, letting myself savor the quiet, the warmth that enveloped me, the way he looked when he was completely at ease. There was something beautiful in this moment, something I never expected to experience. But then my phone buzzed, the sound slicing through the tranquility like a knife. I groaned, reaching for it instinctively. It was a message from Camilla. "What happened last night? You disappeared with Liam. Everyone's talking." My heart dropped into my stomach. I had forgotten about the party, the game, the dare. I had forgotten that, in the midst of everything, I was still just a part of some stupid game. But how could I have forgotten? How could I have let myself believe this was real? I didn't want to think about it, didn't want to face the consequences of my decisions, but the weight of the truth pressed on me like a heavy stone. I set my phone down, looking over at Liam again. He stirred, his eyes flickering open. He blinked a few times, as if he wasn't quite ready to face the morning. "Hey," he murmured, a sleepy smile tugging at his lips. I smiled back, but it felt forced, like I was holding something back. "Morning." He reached for me, pulling me closer, his lips brushing the top of my head in a sweet, familiar gesture. But I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach. Something felt off. "Liam," I said quietly, pulling away just enough to look him in the eye. He raised an eyebrow, his expression shifting slightly. "What's wrong?" I didn't know how to ask the question, how to say what had been haunting me since I woke up. But it had to be said. Was last night part of the game?" He froze, his eyes widening for the briefest moment before his gaze dropped to his hands, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of the blanket. "What do you mean?" His voice was tight, like he wasn't sure how to respond. I swallowed, trying to keep the tremble from my voice. "I mean, was it just a dare? Was I part of some stupid game, like the rest of the people here?" His silence was deafening. Then his expression softened, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. I don't know what you're talking about." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Don't lie to me, everyone's talking about it. You were dared to..." "Stop." His voice was suddenly sharp, cutting through the air between us. I froze, shocked by the intensity in his tone. "I wasn't lying to you. It wasn't like that." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I swear, I didn't..." He paused, and for a moment, I thought he might say something more, something that would make this all make sense. But he didn't. Instead, he just looked at me with an unreadable expression, his jaw tight. I didn't know if I should press further or if I should walk away before this all unraveled completely. "You don't have to explain anything to me, Liam." The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them, and I hated the way they sounded, like I was the one pushing him away. But I couldn't stop myself. "It's fine." He shook his head, reaching out as if to touch me, but I pulled back, unable to face him. "No, it's not fine." His voice dropped lower, the words coming out in a rush. "I never meant for it to go this way. I never thought..." But I didn't want to hear it. Not now. The truth was clear now, clearer than ever. The moments we shared, the kisses, the touches, they didn't matter to him the way they mattered to me. I had fallen for him, but he had fallen for the game. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that I had believed it was real, or the realization that I was just another challenge for him to conquer. "I have to go." I stood up, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. I grabbed my clothes from the floor, my fingers trembling as I pulled them on. Liam's voice followed me, but I couldn't listen. Wait, please. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I needed to get out. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The door to the room clicked softly behind me as I stepped into the hallway, my chest tight, my mind a mess of confusion and hurt. Every step I took felt like it echoed through the empty house, a reminder of everything that had just shattered in the span of a few hours. I found my way to the bathroom, locking the door behind me, and leaned against the sink, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My makeup was smudged from the night, my hair tangled, but it wasn't the physical mess I saw in front of me that hurt. It was everything inside. I had trusted him. I had let my guard down, allowed myself to believe the lie that there was something real between us. But now, all of it felt like nothing more than a cruel game. I wanted to scream, to punch something, but instead I just stood there, my hands shaking. My phone buzzed again, and I almost didn't want to look. I was terrified of what it might be, terrified of seeing his name, terrified of hearing him apologize for something that couldn't be fixed. But I looked anyway. It was from Camilla. "Where are you? What happened? Everyone's talking. Liam left a few minutes ago looking like he'd seen a ghost." I exhaled slowly, the words sinking in like poison. Liam. Leaving. Was that how this was going to end? Me, sitting here, crying over someone who hadn't cared as much as I had? I couldn't stay here, not with those thoughts swirling in my head. I grabbed my bag and slipped out of the bathroom, moving quickly through the house, trying to avoid the other partygoers who were either too drunk or too caught up in their own worlds to notice me. I slipped out the front door, the cool night air biting at my skin, but it was a relief. A brief moment of clarity. I needed distance. I needed space. I walked down the street, not knowing where I was going, but just needing to escape. The world around me felt too loud, too overwhelming. The night seemed too dark, too heavy. And then, just as I turned a corner, I heard a voice. "Hey!" I froze. It was Liam. I hadn't even heard him approach, but there he was, standing at the end of the street, his jacket pulled tight around him as if the cold could somehow protect him from the mess he'd made. My heart stopped, my breath catching in my throat. I wanted to walk away, pretend I hadn't heard him, but I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move. "Please," he said, his voice raw, almost desperate. "Let me explain." I crossed my arms tightly over my chest, trying to control the tears that threatened to spill over. "Explain what, Liam?" He stepped closer, but I didn't move. The distance between us was a silent chasm, one that couldn't be bridged with words alone. I messed up. His words were thick with guilt, his eyes searching mine as if he was looking for some kind of forgiveness. "I never meant to hurt you, I swear. It wasn't just a game." I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "Then what was it? Because from where I'm standing, it sure looked like I was just another dare to you." His expression faltered, like my words had struck him harder than anything else. He looked away, guilt written all over his face. "It wasn't like that," he said again, quieter this time. "I was dared to go with you. At first, I thought it was just a joke. But then," he looked back at me, his eyes pleading, his voice thick. "But then, I couldn't stop thinking about you. I don't know when it happened, but somewhere along the way, I realized I stepped back, holding up my hand to stop him. Number don't." The words came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. I was too raw, too broken. "I don't need your excuses, Liam. I don't need to hear that it was all some mistake." He flinched at my words, but I couldn't stop now. "You made your choice. You chose the game over me. I don't care if you were sorry after. It doesn't change what happened. For a moment, we both stood there in silence, the weight of everything hanging between us. He opened his mouth to speak again, but I shook my head, holding up my hand once more. Please, just go. And just like that, the walls I had built around myself, around my heart, were up again. I turned away, refusing to look back, and walked away from him. The sound of his footsteps fading behind me felt like a quiet confirmation that he was leaving me behind. The days that followed felt like a blur, each one a slow and painful crawl. I avoided Liam completely, blocking his messages, ignoring his calls. I knew I should have been stronger, that I should have moved on faster, but my heart wasn't cooperating. It still ached for him, for the boy who had kissed me like I meant something to him, and for the boy who, in the end, turned out to be just another part of some game. I threw myself into my schoolwork, keeping my head down and my focus on anything other than the empty space he had left behind. The people at school whispered when I walked by, and I could feel their eyes on me like I was the punchline to some cruel joke. But I refused to let it show. "Are you okay?" Camilla asked one afternoon after class, her voice laced with concern as she slid into the seat beside me in the cafeteria. She had been my closest friend for years, and even though I hadn't wanted to talk about what happened with her, or with anyone for that matter, her presence was comforting in a way I couldn't ignore. I shrugged, pretending to be indifferent, even though inside I felt like everything was falling apart. "Yeah, just busy." She didn't buy it. "I'm not an idiot, you know. You've been avoiding me, and you've been avoiding everyone else. And..." She hesitated, glancing around before lowering her voice. "I know what happened with Liam. Everyone's talking about it." I bit my lip, trying not to let the flood of emotions overwhelm me. "Camilla, I don't want to talk about it." My voice was barely a whisper, but it was firm. I can't right now." Her expression softened. "I get it, but if you ever do want to talk, I'm here, okay?" I nodded, offering her a weak smile. She gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before standing up to leave, her eyes lingering on me for a moment longer than usual. I could tell she was worried, but what could she do? There was nothing anyone could say to make the hurt go away. It had been a week since that night with Liam, and even though I had forced myself to move forward, I felt like I was walking through life on autopilot. Every time I saw him, whether it was in the hallway, in class, or at lunch, my heart ached. His presence was like a weight pressing down on me, reminding me of the choices I had made and the trust I had given him. And the worst part? He wasn't even trying to fix it. That thought ate away at me more than anything else. The fact that Liam hadn't even made an effort to apologize, to explain, made everything feel worse. It made me feel stupid for believing that he cared in the first place. But then, one afternoon, he approached me. I was sitting outside by the bleachers, staring blankly at the field as the sun started to dip below the horizon. It was one of those rare moments when I had a few minutes to myself, when I could just breathe without the weight of everything else crashing down on me. "Hey." I didn't look up at first, knowing who it was by the sound of his voice. But when I felt his presence next to me, I couldn't ignore him any longer. "What do you want, Liam?" My voice was cold, but I couldn't help it. My heart was already racing, and I hated the way it reacted to him, even after everything that had happened. He sat down next to me, keeping his distance, but I could feel the tension in the air between us. I need to talk to you," he said softly, his voice tinged with regret. I shook my head, my eyes stinging. "You had your chance, Liam. You had plenty of chances, but you didn't care, not really." His hand reached for mine, but I pulled back before he could touch me. "I do care," he said urgently. "I've been trying to figure out how to make this right, but I don't know how to fix it. I screwed up, okay? I was stupid, and I hurt you, but I didn't mean to." I glanced at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. But part of me couldn't believe it. Not anymore. "You don't get it, do you?" I whispered. "It's not about fixing it. It's about trust. You broke something between us, and now I don't know if it can ever be repaired." He flinched at my words, but he didn't look away. "I know, and I hate myself for it, but I'm not asking for forgiveness right away. I just want a chance to prove that I'm not the person you think I am." I bit my lip, my heart warring with my mind. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to let him in again, to give him another chance. But how could I? After everything. "You already proved who you are," I said quietly, "and I don't know if I can forget that." He stayed silent for a long time, and for a second, I thought he might just walk away and leave me alone. But he didn't. Instead, he turned to me, his eyes pleading. "Please don't give up on me. I'm not the guy who did that to you. I swear. I'm not him." I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in days. And for the first time since that night, I felt something stir inside me. Something warm, something familiar. But I still didn't know if it was enough to heal the wounds he had left. The days after that conversation with Liam felt like a constant battle inside myself. I wanted to forgive him. I really did. A part of me still cared about him, still wished things could go back to how they were before everything got messy. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that look on his face the night I walked away. His silence, his hesitation. And it broke me all over again. I went about my days, pretending like nothing had changed. But it had. Something inside me had shifted, and no matter how much I tried to ignore it, the doubt lingered in the back of my mind. Could I trust him again? Did he deserve that chance? It was easier to just avoid him. It was easier to keep my distance, to pretend like I didn't care. But the problem with avoiding him was that it only made everything harder. I saw him everywhere, in the hallways, in class, at lunch. He would glance at me occasionally, but he never approached me again after that day. Maybe it was because he knew I wasn't ready to talk to him. Or maybe he was giving me space. But the way he looked at me, like I was the one thing he couldn't have, it only made my heart ache more. I tried to convince myself that it didn't matter, that he was just another guy in a long line of people who would come and go. But every time I saw him, I couldn't help but remember the way he kissed me, the way he made me feel like I was the only person in the room. "You're still thinking about him, aren't you?" Camilla asked me one afternoon as we sat at our usual table in the cafeteria. She raised an eyebrow, her tone both curious and knowing. I rolled my eyes, trying to play it off. "What are you talking about?" She didn't buy it. She never did. "Don't lie to me. I can see it in your eyes. You still care about him." I sighed, pushing my food around on my plate. "It's complicated, Camilla. You don't understand." She leaned forward, her eyes soft with concern. "I don't need to understand. I just want you to stop hurting yourself. You're holding on to something that isn't healthy for you." I stared down at my food, suddenly losing my appetite. She was right. I was holding on to something that I shouldn't be, something that was only causing me pain. But how could I let go of someone I had let into my heart so easily? I didn't have an answer. That night, I sat on my bed, scrolling through my phone mindlessly, the silence of my room pressing down on me. I had been avoiding my messages from Liam for days, but tonight, something was different. I opened his chat, my heart pounding in my chest as I stared at his name on the screen. "Can we talk? I'm sorry for everything. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm not going to give up on us." The words were simple, but they hit me like a ton of bricks. I stared at them for a long time, my finger hovering over the screen, torn between replying and leaving it unread. I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to respond, to give him the chance he was asking for, but I was scared. I was scared of letting him back in, of trusting him again, only to be hurt all over again. But maybe I had been scared of that for too long. Maybe it was time to stop running from the possibility of something real. I took a deep breath and typed back. I don't know if I can forgive you yet, Liam. I don't know if I can trust you again. But I'm willing to try. Just, please don't let me down again. My finger hovered over the send button for a moment longer before I hit it. My heart was racing, my palms sweaty, but it was out there now. I had given him a chance. A small chance, but a chance nonetheless. I stared at the screen, waiting for a reply, but nothing came. I stayed up for hours, my mind spinning, trying to figure out what to do next. What did this even mean? Was I really ready to open myself up again? Just as I was about to give up and go to bed, my phone buzzed. Thank you. I won't let you down. I promise. I stared at the message, my heart fluttering, a mixture of hope and fear in my chest. Maybe this was the first step. Maybe, just maybe, things could be different this time. The following weeks felt like a slow unraveling, a gradual rebuilding of something that had been broken but not completely destroyed. Liam and I didn't dive back into the same easy, carefree connection we had once had, but we tried. We talked, cautiously at first, and then more openly as the days went by. It was awkward and uncertain at times, but it was also real. It felt like we were both tiptoeing around the past, trying to find a way to move forward without repeating the same mistakes. We met up after school, sitting in the quiet corners of the library or walking around the park, exchanging small talk and stolen glances. There were moments when I felt that old spark between us, that rush of excitement when he smiled at me, or when our hands brushed together. But I also knew that I couldn't throw myself back into the relationship we had before without fully understanding what we were doing. Do you ever think about what happened? He asked me one afternoon as we sat on a bench, watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant, like he was afraid to bring it up. I met his eyes, my heart fluttering slightly at the way he was looking at me. It had taken time, but the way he spoke to me now, without games, without pretense, made me feel like he was finally being honest. All the time, I replied softly. It's hard not to, but I've also realized that I can't keep letting it control me. He nodded, his fingers brushing against mine as he shifted closer. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, and I know I hurt you, but I can't tell you how much I regret it. You didn't deserve that, and I'll spend every day trying to make it up to you. His words were sincere, and for the first time since everything had happened, I truly believed him. I'm trying too, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Trying to trust you again, but it's not easy. He gave me a small, understanding smile. I know, and I'm not rushing you. I just want you to know I'm here. I'll always be here, no matter how long it takes. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of everything finally begin to lift, even if just a little. Maybe, just maybe, we could move forward. Maybe we could find something real after all. The weeks that followed were filled with small steps, slow, deliberate steps, but they felt meaningful. We didn't rush anything, and I didn't need to. What mattered was that we were both committed to making things work, even when it felt like the odds were stacked against us. There were still moments of doubt, still flashes of the pain that I had buried deep inside, but those moments became less frequent as I saw the way Liam was trying to prove himself to me. It wasn't about grand gestures or big promises. It was about the little things. The way he would send me a text just to say he was thinking about me. The way he listened to me, really listened, when I shared my fears and my dreams. The way he made sure to always treat me with respect, no matter how tough things got. One Friday night, A few weeks after we'd started spending more time together again, Liam invited me to a small party at his friend's house. It was casual, low-key, but it was the first time we had done something together outside of our usual one-on-one hangouts. I was nervous, but I agreed, wanting to prove to myself that I was ready to move forward. At the party, I stayed close to Liam, but I also noticed that he gave me space when I needed it. He didn't try to pull me into every conversation or make me feel like I had to be someone I wasn't. It was just easy. And then, in the middle of a conversation with some of his friends, he turned to me, his expression serious. "Hey," he said quietly, his eyes soft. "I've been meaning to ask you something." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, his gaze locking with mine. Would you be willing to give us a real chance?" His voice was vulnerable, his words filled with the kind of hope I hadn't heard in a long time. "I'm not perfect, and I know I've made mistakes, but I want to try. I want to be with you, really be with you. Not for a game, not for anyone else, but for us. Just us." My heart skipped a beat. For the first time, I realized that what he was asking wasn't just for forgiveness. It was for a future together. I felt my chest tighten, emotions swirling inside me, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. It wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about everything that could be. The possibility of something real, something lasting. "Yes," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, I'll give us a chance." A smile broke out across his face and he pulled me into a tight hug. "You have no idea how happy that makes me," he murmured into my hair. "Thank you. Thank you for giving me this chance." As I held him, I realized that I wasn't just letting go of the pain anymore. I was letting myself open up to something new, something that could be beautiful if we were willing to work for it. The next few months weren't perfect. There were still moments when the past would resurface, and there were still times when I questioned whether or not I had made the right choice. But as time passed, I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could make it work. We could build something stronger than the mistakes we had made. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. And as I stood there, wrapped in Liam's arms, I knew that even though we had both made mistakes, this was a new beginning, a real one. And this time, it wasn't a game. It was us.